What triggers your emotional eating or binging? Has emotional eating become a coping mechanism for you? Perhaps a relief or distraction, or a way to kind of escape from life in some way? If this is something that you do regularly, how often does it actually bring comfort to you, and how long does it actually last? Is about being able to be in tune with what's really going on. This can be especially empowering and helpful when it comes to emotional eating and binging. So I thought, first of all, I'd look at some examples of what might be triggering your emotional eating. It might help you to start to explore what's actually going on for you at this time. So first of all, commonly being overwhelmed with at work or with too much work, perhaps dealing with difficult colleagues or a difficult boss is quite common. And I often see people coming home, they tell me they come home and they just need a reward or comfort or something to take them away from this really difficult day. Now, often what happens in these situations is food hasn't been prepared, or there's nothing that they can think, right, I'm their go-to sort of meal that's in the fridge. So, but also things like having an argument, an argument with a partner or family member can be really triggering. And often I see that that's when people will find it hard to cope with the emotions that come from that and go straight to the biscuit tin. Dealing with stress and stressful situations, particularly at home. Perhaps you're at home with young kids, that can be quite stressful. Even older kids can be quite stressful. Perhaps you're juggling work and home life and everything else that goes on. So a lot of stress. Actually, quite a few people that I've worked with in the past have had children who are neurodivergent, so perhaps they've got something like ADHD, which can also be very exhausting for the parent to manage and can lead to just feeling like, there's nothing else that can soothe them at that point. Some people are really putting everything into their jobs and perhaps not prioritizing themselves, so that they're exhausted and burnt out, and then their go-to is something quick and snacky. Some people who have ADHD themselves, who have, perhaps you're diagnosed, it's quite common for women to go undiagnosed, for girls to go undiagnosed as children. And I'm seeing now more and more of the people that I'm working with are either saying, I'm convinced that I've got ADHD, I've been reading up about it and I'm convinced that I've got a lot of the signs and symptoms, or they've only been recently diagnosed. Now, the reason I bring this up is because there is a big connection between binge eating and ADHD to do with how it impacts your dopamine levels. And your dopamine is that reward neurotransmitter, that brain chemical that gives you the reward. People with ADHD are looking for that stimulation from something because they're not getting enough of that dopamine. But it's also quite common that you see people with ADHD being, especially adults, especially women, hyper-focused on things. So they can get stuck into a task or sit at a desk and work all day and actually forget to eat, not in tune with hunger signals particularly well, and completely forget to eat until the point where they're absolutely starving hungry later on in the day, and that can lead to binging. Girls tend to mask it more and present in other ways. So worth looking into if you suspect that might be going on, just to get that validation that actually you understand why this particular thing has been quite hard for you. Also thinking about menstrual cycles. Commonly you might be aware that actually before your period comes, cravings are far more intense and difficult to deal with. And that is because it impacts our serotonin at certain times of the month. It is connected with our estrogen levels. So serotonin is that feel-good hormone, and often if it's low, we're searching particularly for sweet, sugary, carbohydrate type foods. That's where we've got the cravings for that. And this can be even more pronounced, incidentally, with someone who has ADHD, because actually there is links to dopamine levels and, again, your hormones at certain times of the month. So again, really important to just be aware of this so that you can actually notice and say, perhaps know that this is coming up, and that awareness just gives you quite a lot of a sense of just being more calm about it and being prepared. Loneliness is a common reason why people will turn to food as a coping mechanism, and not just people who are living on their own or without family, often people who are surrounded by other people but don't necessarily feel seen or validated in their lives can feel lonely as well. Feeling anxious about many different situations, anxiety really can lead to this kind of emotional eating, and often related to things to do with your body image. So for example, you have an event coming up, sometimes people find they're also very triggered, for example, if they see photos of themselves and they're not happy with their body image. So just being aware and noticing and observing without the judgment. Generally feeling low, sad or depressed is also common. Using food is a way to sort of numb those feelings perhaps, or try and escape that feeling and not working through these emotions. So these are some very common scenarios. I'd be interested to hear from you if there's anything specific that you find really triggers you that I haven't covered. Obviously there could be many things.